Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, can you say something one more time? I don't think I can hear you.
Hello.
Perfect. Okay, awesome. And then we're just waiting on one more. How's your day
Okay,
going?
cool. Good. What about you?
I'm good. I guess we've never met before. I'm Jake. I live in Oklahoma. I graduated from A&M in December of 2018, some class of 2018, and I go to law school up here. So
Oh, okay.
nice. And then we're just waiting on Marilyn.
I'll bring it.
Oh, there you are. How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. So you guys both have your exam on Thursday?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. How are you guys feeling?
Nervous.
Okay.
Yours too.
Okay. That's it's okay to be nervous. So I saw, I guess I've texted and emailed with both you guys, and both you guys really, at least said you guys were kind of confused about horizontal and vertical, and then mergers and just all of that. So I figured we could work backwards. We'll start with chapter 8, and then, or excuse me, chapter 7, chapter 6, and then chapter 5.
Okay,
And then I've really tried to organize it in a way that's useful. It's possible that there's too much content, and if so, we can kind of skip over what you guys are doing well, but we will get started. Let me make sure I have everything in front of me that I need. I had a Zoom link with, or I just had a Zoom with one of my professors, and it ran a little late.
okay. I think you figured out how to record the lecture. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. And I can definitely get it to both you guys. Perfect. Okay, so I guess as we begin, and now I have everything in front of me, any initial questions before we dive in about any of the chapters, any of the topics, just anything you can think of before we start? Okay, I guess we're good on both. And then don't hesitate to stop me. But what we'll probably do is, like I said, the first thing we'll do is talk about horizontal and vertical, and then we'll kind of do like a mini little like test just to see, get you guys thinking in the right direction. So, and if you guys have questions, just interrupt me, or again, maybe wave your hand or something. So the way I always break it down is businesses who operate at the same level are going to be horizontal. And so like manufacturer to manufacturer. And these are going to be their competitors, or at least they could be. So maybe they don't directly compete. So for instance, a car dealership in Seattle doesn't necessarily compete with a car dealership in College Station, Texas, but they're still at the same level. Okay, so I gave some examples that would be like Target and Walmart, Apple and Dell Computers, Amazon and Walmart. And then on the other side, there's vertical. And these are businesses who operate at different levels. So like, for instance, like a manufacturer, and then like a consumer seller, like Walmart primarily exists to sell to consumers, not other businesses. And these businesses are not competitors, or at least not majorly. So for instance, maybe the manufacturer does sell directly to consumers, but that should be like one tiny part of their business. Versus like Walmart, which the majority of their business is selling to consumers. Do you kind of see how that the difference between them right there is? Okay. And so two companies representing different steps in the buyer-seller relationships or production process joins forces. So that'd be like an easy definition of a vertical merger. I put examples in question mark in red for vertical mergers. I was wondering if one of you, or if both of you, could try to give me or make up an example of a vertical relationship. It doesn't have to be a merger, but just give me like a vertical relationship between two companies.
For this on the exam, if it was, because I know he said during lecture today, anything horizontal is anything that has to do with price fixing, and like, for example, Walmart, and they have a bag of chips and they put a different price on it, that's horizontal fixing. I don't understand how the examples would be for vertical. How would those look?
Yeah, absolutely. Marilyn, do you want to try to take a crack at it before I answer it?
Would it be like pencils and like erasers?
So that's kind of the same product. More of like what I was looking for would be like, um, so like for a vertical relationship, a firm who makes jeans, and then like Walmart, who sells
Oh,
jeans.
okay.
One manufactures and one sells.
Oh,
So like that's what I mean. I should have been more clear. That's on me. So for this slide, what I did was I gave 10 examples. And so what I was going to hoping to do was that, we could trade off. So, and is it Leslie?
Yes.
Okay, so Leslie and the Maryland. So someone will go for one, and the other person will go for two, and we'll switch off. You have to identify, is it a horizontal relationship or a vertical relationship? And once we do this, and it's okay to be wrong, I think when we start actually talking about in terms of price fixing or mergers, it's a lot easier to get once you understand, like you got to understand how these firms or how these businesses relate to each other. And then that's when you can figure out, is it horizontal price fixing, discrimination, restraint of trade, merger, so on and so forth. So who would like to start?
I can start.
Okay, so Microsoft and Apple, do they have a horizontal or vertical relationship?
Horizontal because they both involve technology.
Okay, great, good job. Marilyn, you want to take a crack at Procter and Gamble and Walmart? And if you don't know which one of these, like what a firm does, you can just let me know.
okay. What's Procter and Gamble?
Yeah, so Procter and Gamble, they make like a lot of different things. Like they make
Okay.
baby powder, they make socks. They just make a lot of different goods.
So it would be vertical
And why?
because it's manufactured to consumer.
And then what about Walmart? What are they?
They are the consumer.
Yeah, so not necessarily the consumer, but they sell to consumers. So like the manufacturers, Procter and Gamble, the level below that would be like the stores,
Right.
but they're not at the same level. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay. We'll let you go again, Marilyn. Walmart and Target, horizontal or vertical,
Horizontal
and why?
because they're both in the same level. Because like they both do like kind of like the same thing. So I would say they're manufacturer to manufacturer.
Yeah, well, that would be like, because Walmart and Target, they don't manufacture, they don't make goods, they just sell goods. So that
Right.
would be like, yeah, okay. Leslie, McDonald's and Burger King, horizontal or vertical?
Horizontal because they both sell. They're both fast food restaurants.
Absolutely. What about Leslie? Same. Going back to you, Johnson and Johnson and Costco.
Would that be vertical because Johnson's providing Johnson and Costco to sell?
Yeah, 100%. Great
Okay.
job. Do you guys want to keep doing a couple more? Or do you guys think you get it? And it's
I think
okay to ask for more.
A couple more is fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. We're going to skip to number 10. And this is not a business way to think about it, but I was doing some reading and it's an interesting way. So if you think about like the federal, state, and local government, like they stack, okay? Like the federal government is not equivalent to a state government. Like it goes federal, state, local. And so that's kind of how a vertical is. It's a firm who manufactures good is not on the same level of firms who sell goods. So that's just something to think about. But obviously, don't confuse the fact that they're like the federal, state, and local government aren't involved in like they're not firms. But it's just a way to think about layout. So Maryland, let's do number 9, H-E-B and Kroger, horizontal or vertical?
Horizontal.
Okay, good job. Leslie, PepsiCo and Coca-Cola.
Horizontal.
And back to Leslie again, Dell and an assembling firm. So like that, a firm that makes the computer like parts.
Vertical.
Okay. Maryland, Amazon and FedEx.
Vertical.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So you guys are excellent there. Are you guys starting to kind of see the relationships?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, good. I thought that was a good way just to run it through. So there's 4 types of mergers. So now we're going to dive into mergers. There's horizontal, there's vertical, there's market extension mergers, and there's diversification or conglomerate mergers. So horizontal, it's still that same principle. It's a merger between firms in that same industry, McDonald's and Burger King. Under the Clayton Act, they're unlawful if it creates a significant market concentration. So here's an example of a horizontal merger. If Target bought Walmart, if McDonald's bought Burger King, okay? So same level firm merger. A vertical merger is a merger between two firms in the same chain of production and distribution. So, but they're in the same chain, but they're not at the same level. So for instance, Amazon buying FedEx for logistics help. So, Amazon, they sell products, but they have to rely on FedEx, and FedEx gets to charge them whatever prices. Well, what if it was cheaper, for Amazon to buy FedEx and then not have to pay them for everything they ship? So, it's part of Amazon business, but then that'd be a vertical merger. Or back to that example with Dell, like Dell has to rely on computer products and parts, and so they would be buying the facility that makes those parts. Do you kind of see how that's all in the same? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So number 3 is where it starts to get tricky. So these are called market extension mergers, and there's 2 types. Okay. So there's geographic market extension, which I think is the slightly easier one. And then there's product market extension. Okay. So an example would be like Lay's potato chips buying Pepsi. So if you think about it, like Lay's is in like the snack industry. And if Lay's said, wow, like we make so much money selling potato chips, what do people also like with potato chips? They like soda. Okay, so we want to expand our business to another product. Let's buy Pepsi. Okay, so that would be an example of a product market extension. They are trying to extend the market of their products. They're trying to get a bigger bubble. A geographic market extension, on the other hand, is when firms sell the same or roughly the same goods, but typically the same goods, and then they're trying to get into a new physical location market. So on the examples, that would be like H-E-B buying Publix. I don't know if you guys have ever been to Florida. Publix is a big grocery store chain, and they have tons of them in Florida. So H-E-B, as we know, like they operate in Texas. But if H-E-B said, we actually also want to operate in Florida, H-E-B could just build their own stores in Florida, or they could just buy over through geographic market extension all the Publix in Florida. Okay, and you guys see how that's different than a product market extension? Okay, so that's the hardest of the 3. Then there's this thing called diversification merger or conglomerate merger, and this is also weird. But then, and I tell this to Marilyn every time, you get this feeling in your gut when you look at diversification mergers. So it's similar to product market extension, where a company wants to kind of change up what they're doing. But if you notice in that, Lay's potato chip buying Pepsi, like snack to cola, that's kind of related. Like it's all food, it's all like junk food. But a diversification merger, it's 2 separate industries. Okay, they're not related. So I gave the example of like AT&T buying HBO or Amazon buying SpaceX. Like it's beyond a product market extension. So yeah, they're they're not dealing with geographic analysis. They're not dealing with horizontal or vertical. It's its own separate thing. They're buying just something completely different, and they're doing it just to keep the company healthy. They want to have different assets. So oil and gas companies, they're buying other smaller companies to make sure that if oil prices go down, they can still make money. But it's diversification or conglomerate. It's just kind of way out there. So now we're going to spice it up a little bit. It's kind of what we just did a second ago, where you picked horizontal and vertical, but now I want you to pick which of the 5 categories it is. So I have, a couple different, I think I have technically, 14 different options or examples. And so when it's your turn, you'll identify whether it's a horizontal, a vertical, a product market extension, or a product market extension, geographic market extension, or a conglomerate / diversification merger. Okay. Anybody want to start? I'll take the first one just so you guys can see.
Okay.
So example 1. So a snack food company merges with a beverage company. Well, that sounds really like Lay's potato chip merging with Pepsi, which we just talked about. So as we just said 30-40 seconds ago, that would be a product market extension. Okay. And number 2, we also did a second ago. So we'll go with Maryland. Maryland, a Florida grocery store merges with a Texas grocery store. What would that be?
The geographic market extension.
Correct. Now, and because Professor Swim is tricky, it is a geographic market extension. It's also a horizontal geographical market extension, because HEB and Publix or the Florida grocery store and the Texas grocery store, they operate in the same level. Okay. So that would be a horizontal graphic extension. And I know it's not listed on one of the fives, but I had to get, I had to trick you guys somewhere. So number three, Leslie, this will be yours. A home goods store merges with an Amazon-like e-commerce website.
Is that vertical and geographic market extension?
So it's going to be a product market extension, because in that case, we didn't necessarily, I probably see what you're saying, because like it's an actual physical store, like with an e-commerce, but it's really going to be that product. Now Amazon really wants to be able to sell furniture more or whatever. But absolutely what you said, it's also a vertical one. So great job there.
Okay.
So the answer for that would be a vertical product extension. And in the slideshow, I actually have the answers in notes, so I can send it to you guys, and you guys can definitely check it out later. We'll go back to Leslie. So what about Tesla merging with Best Buy? How do you feel about that one?
That one would be diversification with vertical. No.
Diversification, from what I understand, it's no horizontal, it's no vertical, and you guys can correct me, but like it's its own thing.
Oh, okay.
You had it right. I'm taking diversification, and I'll just forget you said anything else.
So that one doesn't go with anything.
Correct. And Marilyn, you're also nodding your head. Do you agree with that too?
Yes, because it's just like they're two different fields. Like they're not related in any sort of way, I would say.
Yeah. Like that's the justification for it, is like there is no logical explanation. So we're throwing out horizontal and vertical when we deal with the conglomerate mergers.
Okay, cool.
But good job there. And we can definitely circle back and discuss that later too. But we have a couple more. So what about a clothing supplier merging with Old Navy, Marilyn? What do you think?
I think vertical.
Yes.
Okay.
You don't have to think it because you knew it.
Yeah.
Leslie, Fox News merging with CNN.
Horizontal.
Yeah, good job. Marilyn, Disney merges with Apple.
I would say disferification, the what's it called, like the last one.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so like I would have taken a couple different answers. That's what I concluded with. We'll just keep it simple. Yeah, just now you got me messing the word up, but it's okay. It's
yeah, I know.
What is it called? Diversification or conglomerate mergers. Okay, cool. Leslie, Academy merges with Sports Authority.
Product extension.
So are they operating with the same? Do you know what Sports Authority? Well, do you know?
I mean horizontal.
Yeah, it's horizontal. Yeah, absolutely. We'll go back to you, Leslie. Samsung merges with Nintendo, and if you need to ask any like context questions, you can.
Is that vertical?
So it's going to be, in my interpretation, a product market extension. I kind of saw Samsung, makes regular, handheld. They also make like TVs. They make screens, and then Nintendo makes their own video games and their own video game like hardware. So Samsung, by buying Nintendo, they would start making video games.
Okay.
So that would be kind of a product extension. Marilyn, Barnes & Noble merges with Target.
I'm kind of mixing between vertical and product market extension.
Yeah, I went with, product market extension here. Right. I just said, like they're both stores, and then by Target buying Barnes & Noble, maybe they want to start selling more books. And luckily on the test, it's going to be easier to figure it out, because he's going to give you more context. He's going to give you, questions with the stem and more information, but these are just your gut reactions. How are you feeling about them? Leslie, number 7, Forever 21 merges with H&M.
Is that product extension?
So I would have gone with horizontal, I could
Ugh.
absolutely see product extension just because, you know, maybe they make slightly different clothing, but product extension, it's more of like they want to get into a like different market, like with that's the Frito-Lay and PepsiCo, and it's possible I don't know enough about H&M's business, but I think the next one would be, so number 8, Lululemon, you know, a athletic wear company merging with Peloton, an exercise machine company. I think that's a better example of product market extension, because, you know, Lululemon, they make the athletic wear, and then they're saying, oh, well, we make athletic wear. What if we also sell exercise equipment? So then they're extending their product market.
Oh.
Okay.
Versus Forever 21 merging with H&M, you know, they both sell clothes. So Leslie, I'll let you go. Number 9, Chevron Gas, like oil, merging with HEB. What do you think it is?
That's the last one, the diversification.
100%. Great job. Yeah, absolutely. They're not
So
related.
just to clarify, product extension is more of making a product better and combining it with another company so that they can sell more. And horizontal itself is just two of the same companies, you can say, combining together.
I don't necessarily know if I want to like just like say product market extension is necessarily coming together to like just make a different product or like to improve their products, but it's more of they do similar things, but it's not as similar. So like back to
Okay.
the horizontal, you know, Target buying Walmart, like they are direct
Okay.
competitors. And if I kind of go
Okay.
back to horizontal, I said businesses are competitors, or at least could be. And when you look at number 7, Forever 21 merging with H&M, like they're absolutely competitors.
Okay, I see it.
Yeah, and feel free to definitely ask more questions when you
Okay.
as they pop up. A good question.
I had
So
sorry. I had a question. I was wondering with the Chevron merging with HEB, I was just thinking like in real life, like HEB does have like a gas station. So did they do like diversification of a merger in real life?
could you say that again one more time?
Yeah, so you know how like at HEB they actually have a gas station. So did they like get a gas company and did a diversification merger to have that gas there at their
It's very possible. Like that's actually an interesting thing. I didn't think about it, but yes, like that's a prime example. It's also possible that they just said we're going to just fund it ourselves and just start our own
oh,
branch of the company to do gas. But they very well could have just bought over an operator to do it for them.
okay.
But no, excellent question. So on this slide, in the book, it talks about when mergers get scrutinized. Okay, so and it deals with market concentration. Do you guys at all does this at all sound familiar? It deals with what is it like the Heath? I'm sorry, I got to think what it's called. The triple H, the Herfindahl Hirschman Index, HHI. Do you guys recall any of this?
No.
Okay, so
No.
in the HHI, which is like the HHI is an index to determine how concentrated the market is. Okay, and the more concentrated a market is, the less likely a merger is going to go through. Okay, so if the HHI index is between 0 to 1,000, a merger is pretty much it's going to happen. It's going to be approved. If it's between 1,000 to 1,800, okay, it's going to be challenged. It's more likely than not to be challenged. And if it's going to be 1,800 or greater, it's going to be heavily scrutinized. So since you guys don't recall it, I didn't include a slide on how you calculate the HHI. At least when I took the exam, there was a couple questions about this. But essentially the way you calculate HHI is, let's say there were 4 companies, okay? And one company had 40% of the market, one company had 30, one company had 20%, and one last company had 10%. So that adds up to 100%. If you square each, and I don't want there to be a lot of math because there won't be any really math on the exam. But if you were to square each number, so 10 squared is 100, 20 squared is 400, 30 squared is 900, and 40% squared is 1600. And if you were to add all 4 of those numbers up, you would get a HHI of 3,000, which would mean a merger in that market would be unlikely to be allowed. There's also some other factors. The government's going to look at like the market power of the firms, and market power is defined as the ability of a firm to have prices above market level. So how strong is that firm? How loyal is the brand? The next thing they'll look at is, like I just said, market share. How much of the total market does that company command? What is that company's product market? We just kind of talked about product market. What do they sell? What is their geographic market? Where are they located? And then the relevant market, and you should definitely know this, is defined as the product market plus the geographic market. But let's go back to the example. So assuming we had a HH, it should say HHI, so the market has an HH index of 1050, okay? There are two firms and they're merging and they're in the same industry and they sell the same product. If firm A is in a well-established firm and firm B is a startup, I'm going to argue for the merger and argue against, and then we can discuss relevant factors. Now I could do the arguing, or maybe if one of you guys feels comfortable, would one of you guys like to argue for why this merger should be allowed, or maybe argued against? It's kind of interactive, and you don't have to do it if you guys don't feel comfortable, but I think it'd be a good learning opportunity.
I can try to argue.
Do you want to argue for the merger, which would probably be the easier position? I think you'd probably learn a decent amount.
For the 4.
Okay, I'll go first and I'll argue against, unless you want to go, Leslie.
No, you can go ahead.
Okay, cool. So I would argue against by saying that, and this just really conceptually helps you understand. So since the market has an index of HHI index of 1050, that falls into that 1,000 to 1,800 range, which means it should be challenged. The government should take a look at this. And if one firm is well established and the market's decently concentrated, why should they be allowed to go and buy a startup? We have antitrust laws to protect consumers. If firm A is doing well enough by themselves, why do they need even more help? So that's how I'd argue against it. Do you want to try to argue for it using these factors, Marilyn?
I'll try.
It's okay. It's okay. Give it your best shot.
Since the HH index is close to the normal range, which it wouldn't get what's it called? Challenge, yes. When it wouldn't get a challenge, still like 50 more, So I would say it's still at that relative area where it shouldn't be challenged. And also firm A might want to get firm B, since it's a startup, to help them. They might combine both of their powers. Like firm B might actually have more, let's say, technology information than firm A. So that's what they were missing. So that's why they get firm B, because they know that they have more technology information. And then at the same time, firm B becomes part of this big established firm now, instead of just being a startup.
100%. And that was the absolute correct answer. And that's kind of like how the question on the exam, it won't be as long. You won't have to argue or for or against it, but it wants you to be able to look at the HHI index and look at and it'll give you factors stated in a sentence and think, is this merger going to be contested? Mm-hmm. And so if you can argue a for and against it, you'll definitely you understand the topics there. If it's between, one stated for the second time, it falls into that 1,000 to 1,800 range, and it's on the very lower end, which means it really almost wasn't even challenged. It's probably going to be allowed, assuming the other factors just aren't going against it. So excellent job there. So diving into whether something gets, unlawful, there's two approaches. There's the per se rule and the rule of reason. Stated simply, per se rule, if you do it, it doesn't matter your intent, it's automatically unlawful. Intent or cause does not matter, and there's no defense available. For rule of reason, it's a flexible standard. It allows some anti-competitive practices. It cannot be an unreasonable violation, and there are factors for the court to consider depending on the type of violation. Before we dive into each of the antitrust violations, any questions about mergers?
The topic we just discussed with the HHI index, that's in chapter 7. Was that in the book? I did not see that. I didn't even know that was going to be talked about.
Marilyn, did you see it in the book?
Unless, I read, probably maybe I missed it, but I don't remember.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, no problem. So it was on, so, my book, it's decently outdated. It was on page, it was like on the last couple pages of the book.
Oh, yeah, I kind of skimmed through it.
Yeah, no problem. It literally was like, so for me, it's page like 241. It's in the
Okay.
merger section. Do you guys have your
Okay.
books on you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. It's like half a page.
Okay.
But essentially the way I just explained it is everything just boils
Okay,
down.
cool.
And I actually use
Okay.
the exact same numbers.
Okay, cool.
So price discrimination, it's per se illegal, okay? And that the Clayton Act for price discrimination was going to be supplemented by the Robinson-Patman Act of 1936. And price discrimination is essentially you selling, and it's on the top right here, a seller cannot sell the same product to different buyers for different prices, okay? Then there's a certain type of price discrimination called predatory price discrimination, and that's the elements on the left. So if the defendant is selling a price, if the price the product is being sold for is lower than the cost, if the defendant was then able to monopolize the market because he did so or she did so, and the monopoly lasted long enough for the defendant to recoup the lost revenue. So that's called predatory price discrimination. It's a much more serious offense, but still, even if a defendant is not practicing predatory price discrimination, if they just sold two different buyers the same product for two different prices, that's price discrimination, okay? And they can still be per se, they can be in trouble because it's per se illegal. There's 4 defenses. The first one is like a volume discount. Like Walmart naturally is able to sell things cheaper because they pay less for them because they buy so much, economies of scale. And a local store doesn't get volume discounts usually. Then there's this thing called cost justification. So it logically makes more sense for you to charge a person something if you have to deliver it or it just takes longer to get to them. Changing conditions. If you are selling perishable goods, if you have to get it far away, that changes things. Or if the quality of the perishable goods you get, maybe you have to charge it less to a consumer because the batch you just got in wasn't as good. Another example of that would be like seasonal goods. So if you had a consumer buy a coat during winter, they might have paid full price, but then if you sell a coat out of the winter season, let's say in summer, you may sell it at a discount. And the last one is meeting a rival's price. If your rival then says, hey, I'll sell a pizza for $9, you don't have to continue to sell your pizza for $15. If you sell a pizza for $15 and then your rival cut their price to $9, you can then also cut your price to $9. You just can't beat your rival if you're cutting a price to respond for price discrimination. Okay, any questions on price discrimination? Okay, cool. So next slide on price discrimination. So I have a quick example, and we don't have to do all of it, but Jay's Electronics bought Samsung TVs at $100 a unit, but is selling them in state A for $50 and in state B for $200. Jay is underselling all of his competitors in state A. Is this unlawful? Absolutely. And just going back to those things, he's selling it. This is predatory price discrimination because he's selling it for less than he paid, and he's selling it, selling less than he paid for it. He's going to monopolize the market because everybody's going up for in state A that they can't afford it. He's underselling them. And then C, assumedly, once he undersells everybody and runs everybody out, he's going to jack the prices back up. And by selling it higher in state B, he's also subsidizing his losses. So he's actually making the same, even though he's operating at a loss in state A. Leslie, do you want to take a crack at example 2?
Yes.
Okay, Walmart buys designer jeans for much cheaper than local stores. Walmart prices their jeans lower than their rivals can. Is this unlawful?
Yes.
So it is unlawful, but then Walmart has a defense of the volume discount. So because they can sell it cheaper, because they get it at cheaper, they can also sell it for cheaper. So it was unlawful, but then they have a defense.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, Marilyn, Claire sells candy. Jim lives 10 minutes away and you charge him $20 a pound. Tom lives 3 hours away and you charge him $50 a pound. Did you illegally price discriminate?
Yes, but you have a defense because a gym lives 10 minutes away, so you don't have to travel as far. So you're not losing as much gas and you don't have to pay as much. So that's why his is cheaper. Tom lives 3 hours away, so you're spending more money on gas. You're just spending more money just to give him his product.
Yeah, and on the exam, it'll probably just say like it wasn't a legal price discrimination. It's
Right.
just assuming that the defense would cover it, but technically you did violate it, but you have a defense. So then exclusionary practices are the next thing we'll dive into. 3 types. There's tying arrangements, and that's per se with a twist. There's exclusive dealing contracts, which is going to be rule of reason, and there's boycotts. And boycotts are easy and difficult, but they're easy because they're per se legal if the group has market power and it's done to restrict or exclude competitors. Do you guys have any strong feelings, emotion of hate, confusion about exclusionary practices, or should I just dive right in?
Just tying arrangements.
Okay, awesome,
Yeah.
great. Okay, tying arrangements are awesome. So do you guys feel pretty good about exclusive dealing contracts? I can just skip example 1 then.
You can still do example 1.
Yeah, still do.
Okay, and I'll just explain it to save time,
Okay.
since we're running a little bit behind, since I said 2 hours. But example 1, you sell printers, and in your state, Target is the only store that can sell printers. If you make a contract with Target, which makes you the only company that can sell printers, did you violate the law, and which exclusionary practice occurred? You likely violated the law under the rule of reason for exclusive dealing contracts, because you basically only made the contract with Target to make sure that no other company could sell printers in that state. Okay, like you did it out of bad faith, and that's the whole purpose of antitrust law, is to make sure that businesses play fairly. And if you're ever confused on an answer, if something would ultimately hurt the consumers, antitrust law is probably going to protect you, because antitrust law is focused on protecting consumers. And consumers aren't protected if now they can't pick between printers at Target. If there's now only one brand of printer at Target because Target made an agreement, that's bad for consumers. So it's an exclusive dealings contract, and it's likely unlawful. And we're not exactly sure, because it is rule of reason. So it's going to come down to a court. Okay, so exclusionary practices continue. Example 2, James sells Xbox consoles. However, if you want to buy an Xbox from him, you also have to buy 4 games from him. Is it unlawful, and what type? What do you guys think?
That it is unlawful.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's unlawful, and it's a tying arrangement. Essentially, it's under that per se with a twist. Do you guys have a good way would one of you guys like to explain per se with a twist, if you guys just have a good definition or a good way to describe it?
The way I think about it, it's per se, but if they have like some type of defense, it can be rule of reason. Like that's the way.
Absolutely. Really good. That's a good way to put it. But like, it stinks because like I can't give you a better answer than that. But yeah, it's just that, like, it's a thing he invented. It's just a way of the court say, yeah, like this is per se, but then we don't want to treat it like it's per se. So just tying arrangements, just keep in your mind per se with a twist. He shouldn't hit you over the head too hard with it, as long as you just remember tying arrangements per se with a twist. Now, there are exceptions to tying arrangements, and we'll get to that in a second. But example 3 and 4, pretty chill. So I'll let you take a crack at this one, Leslie. Apple, Microsoft, and Samsung all come together and agree not to sell their products at Walmart. Unlawful, and what type?
It is unlawful because they're making a contract to just sell it to theirs and not Walmart. And it would be
I'm so sorry.
What was the options again?
It would be exclusive dealings, boycotts,
exclusive dealing, yeah. That one.
Okay, yeah, definitely. It would absolutely be exclusive dealing.
Contract.
No, I lied. I am so sorry. It is actually a boycott.
I
looked at the wrong thing. So it's a horizontal boycott, because Apple, Microsoft, and Samsung, they're all on like the same level, and they're all boycotting Walmart. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So I explained that one badly, where I told you the wrong answer at first. It is absolutely a horizontal boycott, because 3 equal leveled firms are boycotting a 4th one. It is unlawful.
Okay.
You can't do it. And horizontal boycotts are always per se illegal. You can't do it, because the consumer is going to be hurt by that. Example 4, a school agrees to pay substitute teachers $100 a day. If all of the substitute teachers agree to not work until their pay is increased, is this unlawful? I'll circle back to you, Leslie. Is it unlawful?
Okay. This one's hard. I don't know this one.
Well, just think about it. So, we're dealing with exclusionary practices. Does it sound like a tying an arrangement?
Yes. No.
So does it sound like does it sound like the Xbox example?
No, it doesn't.
Okay, so it's not a tying an arrangement. Good job. So we got two more. We have the exclusive dealings contract, and we have a boycott.
Is it the dealing contract?
So it's going to be a boycott. So the exclusive dealings contract, what's happening is you are dealing, or the firm is making a deal with another firm for them to do something. In this one, they're making an agreement to not do something, and it's multiple. It's substitute teachers, and they're saying, we are boycotting from working until you pay us more money. And so a boycott is always, or a horizontal boycott, because all the teachers are on the same level. It's a horizontal boycott. It's always per se illegal. And we'll get into more boycotts in a second, but I'll flag it, and I can always text you some notes about that after class.
Okay, cool.
Or after this session. Let me just write that down, because it definitely is tricky. Yeah, but exclusive dealing, definitely think, the way I think about it is it's that Target example. It's you want to ice everybody out. So tying in arrangements, I'm giving a little bit more detail here. So a seller requires a buyer to buy an additional product as a condition of purchasing the product they want. It's an all or nothing. So like back to that Xbox example, if you want to buy that Xbox, you also have to get the 4 games from that same seller. And if you don't want the 4 games and you don't plan on buying the 4 games, then you can't buy the Xbox. And the exception is tying arrangements don't apply to land or services. So if you are buying let's say, I'm trying to think of service. So if you got a massage, and a massage is a service, and they say, okay, it's $50 for the massage, but you also have to buy the massage oil for the masseuse to use. That would be a tying arrangement, but that it wouldn't count because it's a service. Perfect. I'm planning to move on to market divisions. Are you guys feeling fine with that?
Mm-hmm.
And Leslie, I can definitely circle back. Marilyn, do you have a question?
So are you going to go over how like political boycotts work?
What'd you say?
If you're going to go over political boycotts.
You said legal boycotts?
No, are you going to explain how like vertical boycotts work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think vertical boycotts are, weirdly enough, actually, I'm not gonna have a specific slide about it, but I think it's kind of explained well in the vertical market divisions.
Okay.
But if you want, I'll just give you a quick tie-in. So the difference between a vertical boycott and a horizontal boycott, if for a vertical boycott, so this is an example of a vertical boycott, if a manufacturer, okay, said, we are not going to provide our clothes to Walmart, we are refusing to sell to Walmart, only to hurt Walmart. We're going to sell to everybody but Walmart because we want to drive Walmart out of business. Okay.
Yeah, I got it.
That would be a vertical boycott. And that horizontal boycott would be like if everybody was on the same level and they were icing out someone on the same level. So market divisions, all horizontal market divisions are per se illegal. It's easy to think of horizontal market divisions as per se illegal because pretty much everything horizontal is per se illegal. So there's a couple different types of market divisions. There's that geographic market division. An example of that would be and I did this example on the video last night. If there was like 4 car companies, we'll say like Ford, Chevy, Toyota, and what was the last one I used? Ford, Chevy, Toyota, and GMC. And let's say that they all sat down and Ford said, I'm only going to sell my trucks in East Texas. And Chevy said, I'm going to sell my trucks in South Texas. And Toyota said, I'm going to sell my trucks in North Texas, and GMC said, I'm only going to sell my trucks in West Texas. And they're doing that because then, you know, they don't have to compete on price against each other, because if you live in South Texas, you're not going to drive to North Texas. It's a long drive to buy a cheaper truck. At least most people won't. So it hurts consumers. Okay. So what it's happening is all these horizontal firms are making an agreement to divide up the market to hurt consumers. So that's an example of a geographic market division. A functional one, and it's kind of similar to a vertical market division, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a second, is it's, let's say a company sells widgets, okay? It's like a company makes widgets, and then the companies all come together, and the first company says, I'm only going to sell to like households, like regular consumers, average Joes. The second company says, I'm only going to sell to businesses, you know, business to business purchasers. And the third one says, I'm only going to sell to government, okay? Which then that means is if you want to buy this widget and you're a normal to average, you know, just average consumer, there's no other firm you can buy it from, because they've all, you know, sliced up the market. So then there's only one provider per section of the market. Does that make sense? Okay. Does that make sense, Leslie?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So absolutely, all of those, and because it's all the actions are being done by, you know, competitors, normally they would be competitors and people on the same level of the supply chain, it's going to be horizontal. And since it's horizontal, it's going to be per se illegal. Now, a vertical market division, and this is that rule of reason approach, because sometimes it might make sense to do it. There's two types. There's territorial. So that would be like a manufacturer tells a buyer that they can only sell in a certain area. And this is allowed. So if you think about car dealerships, and this is, don't confuse with the car dealership example I just made, but I think Swim, at least back in my day, gave this example. So if you notice, in like every major city, there's like a Ford dealer and a Chevy dealer and a Toyota dealer, okay? But if it's a like minor city like Oklahoma City, there's only one Ford dealer actually in the city limits, and there's only one Chevy dealer or Toyota dealer. And so what happens is the main Ford and the main Chevy, they don't want to put two dealerships right next to each other because they don't necessarily want them to compete with each other. So that's what this territorial vertical market division is. It's saying the branch above them, the person who makes the cars, in this case Ford, they're saying, well, congratulations, John, you can run a Ford dealership, but you can't be in this area. You can only be in this area. And congratulations, you know, Tanya, you can run a Ford dealership, but you have to stay in that area. Okay, so it is vertically, you know, it is dividing the market, but it's from a top person. Now, a customer vertical market division would be a manufacturer tells a buyer they can only sell to a specific customer base. So back to the car example, since I'm using it this entire time, and hopefully this doesn't confuse you. If Ford said, okay, Tanya, you can sell Fords, but you can only sell to the government agencies. Like only can, you know, the U.S. Forest and Wildlife and Fisheries. Only government agencies can buy cars from you. You can't sell to like consumers. And then they said to another person, okay, well, you can sell cars to businesses. And they told another like buyer, you can sell to consumers. And I think that example sounded confusing. So you can definitely ask some questions.
When we're identifying all these scenarios and stuff, will it be asking us whether it's horizontal market division or vertical market division, or will it be like asking for more specifics like the type, territorial, customer, or?
It's not really going to ask you territorial customer, so it's really just can you identify vertical market division? Okay. And then it would be more of like, is this unlawful? Is this per se illegal? Is this rule of reason? So like you really got to know just horizontals per se. And then if you conclude it's not horizontal, then it has to be vertical and it's rule of reason. But it's rule of reason unless price fixing is also involved. And if price fixing is also involved, it becomes per se. But I don't think he's going to test that, but that's something you should just consider. If it is, it's only going to be one question. So I think this is the last slide I had on antitrust law, and it's exceptions to antitrust law. So there's 4 major exceptions. Natural monopolies. Natural monopolies occur because the business world shaped it out to that, that way. Maybe a firm just has an intrinsic advantage and they didn't acquire it unethically. They didn't acquire it through, fraud. They didn't do it because they lowered their prices and ran everybody out of business. It just happened that way. If you have property and you discovered a magical spring that gives people, eternal life if they drink out of this water, like Tuck Everlasting, you have a natural monopoly. No one else has that. Okay. But just because you have a natural monopoly doesn't mean it's illegal. At least theoretically under antitrust law, the United States government can't come penalize you because you have this magical spring water and you're, refusing to let other businesses come park on your land and sell that spring water. The second exception to antitrust law is going to be labor unions. So the Clayton Act specifically exempt labor unions. So I know we just talked about boycotts, but boycotts are allowed if they're done by a labor union. The third is an agricultural co-op or association. So these are also exempted by the Clayton Act. And these are like nonprofit organizations that serve to help farmers, give them low credit loans or just extremely low interest or no interest. Last one is a state action enterprise. And it was put in the Sherman Act. The key case on point is Parker v. Brown, also known as the Parker or Brown Doctrine. And so an example of that is if a state says, cool, I will let you run a liquor store. And we're only going to hand out so many permits, but congratulations, you have a permit to run a liquor store. That's allowed. Because normally, states to a certain extent are given the right to regulate their economy. Okay, so if a state only wants to have 9 liquor stores in the entire state, that might then become an oligarchy, but then it's allowed. So those are the 4 exceptions to antitrust law. So that was essentially Chapter 7 in about an hour. How are you guys feeling about Chapter 7?
Better.
Yeah, a lot better.
Okay. Leslie, I know this is your first session, so you don't have to tell me. You can totally just pop out on your own. Do you want to continue to administrative agencies? Do you want me to just record it and send it to you? How are you feeling?
I can stay. It's fine.
Okay, cool. So I know I told you guys 2 hours. Do you guys want to mostly focus on administrative agencies and then do a little bit of torts review? Do you want to do like 30 and 30? How do you kind of want to break that down? What are you guys feeling the most stressed over?
I think 30 and 30 should be good.
Marilyn, is there any topics in Chapter 5 and Chapter 6 you would like to break down?
I think it's more, I think I got Chapter 5 pretty much down.
Yeah.
And I think it's just Chapter 6 that I'm kind of stuck on.
Okay, then we could even do 40 and 20 if that would make you guys feel better. So I have a lot of slides on administrative agencies because, like, I don't know if you can see this, we're on like slide 17 to 70. So I put a lot of information on administrative agencies and FDA. So we'll just try to breeze through. So great. 3 branches of government. I know that Marilyn has seen this slide. Administrative agencies are this wonderful thing that embody all 3 branches of government into one. Okay, so not only can they enforce the laws, make the laws, they can also tell you, congratulations, we just passed the law and we're going to take away everything you own because we feel like it. And then they also get to run the court that tells you that too. So how are administrative agencies created? It's done through an enabling statute. Okay, so Congress has to establish them. Congress establishes these enabling statutes. And in that enabling statute, it's going to have 4 things. It has the regulatory mission. What's the purpose of the administrative agencies? How is the administrative agency structured? How does it operate? And can the administrative agency, how do they enforce things? And then Congress, if you can make it, they can also destroy it. I asked kind of a rhetorical question here. How broad is an enabling statute? It's incredibly broad, okay? And I kind of liken it to Congress. They're making the frame of the house, and then administrative agencies get to decorate it. Like once they're established, they get to kind of figure out what they're about. And at first, this is going to be kind of lecture heavy, and then we'll open up to like more questions. 3 main eras. You guys probably know this by now. Historical, railroad drug company securities. There's the New Deal, FDR. A lot of these administrative agencies were very broad and just very power thirsty. Then we have the modern era, socially conscious. Most of these were created in the 60s and 70s. And these agencies worked for like pollution control, workplace safety, product safety, hiring and firing practices, EEOC. The first agency was the Interstate Commerce Commission. I've heard he always asks that question, but we'll see. You guys will have to let me know. Types of agencies. Okay. It's two baskets of goodies. There's how they regulate industries and control. Okay. Industry specific regulatory agency, they just manage a specific industry. So an example is like the Interstate Commerce Commission. Then there's the economy-wide regulatory agencies. They manage multiple industries. They manage the economy as a whole. That's one way to think about them. There's another way to think about them is how are they controlled? So there's executive agencies. They serve at the privilege and at the right of the president. They are established by Congress, but they directly report to a cabinet position, like the Secretary of the Interior, the Secretary of Labor, the Secretary of Commerce, the Secretary of Human and Urban Development? I forgot. There's tons of them. The Secretary of Defense. And then there's the independent executive agencies. I always want to say executory, but independent executive agencies. So these agencies, they are still at the command of the executive, the president. He can fire and hire their heads, and they have to, be approved by the Senate, but it's not under a cabinet position. Okay. The third type is an independent regulatory agency. These are supposed to be apolitical. So this would be like the Fed, who sets, interest rates in this country. It's supposed to be the most removed for political pressures. And then there's government corporations. Oh, and I should also say with independent regulatory agencies, the president cannot fire them. He can only hire them. And then government corporations, like Amtrak. So type of agencies continued. So this is a fun little exercise. We're going to do it again. So essentially we'll trade off. You have to identify, is it an economic or economy-wide, I should say, or an industry regulatory agency? So I'll start with Maryland. The Federal Trade Commission, what does that sound like? Does it sound like it manages an industry or the economy as a whole?
I feel like it's an industry.
So the Federal Trade Commission actually manages all of the economy. It actually, and as a quick review from the last one, the Federal Trade Commission actually enforces the Sherman Act and, it enforces the Clayton Act. It can't enforce the Sherman Act because the Sherman Act is a criminal code and the FTC is civil only. But the Federal Trade Commission is an economy-wide. Leslie, the National Labor Relations Board, is that an economy-wide regulatory agency or is that industry? What does it sound like?
I think it's industry or regulatory. I don't know which one of those two. I think regulatory.
It's going to be industry or economy. So you're probably thinking economy.
Industry.
It's still economy. So like when I say industry, it's measuring a specific industry. Like it's regulating railroads or baseball or doctors. It is regulating one thing. And if it's regulating multiple industries or just our entire financial sector as a whole, it's going to be the economy wide regulatory. Actually, the official name is Economic Regulatory Agency. So I'll just kind of help you out for the third one, the Environmental Protection Agency. It gets involved in everything. It is huge. It is massive. It is a powerful agency. And so it is an economy-wide. The Interstate Commerce Commission, that they only regulate railroads. That is an example of an industry. And then the Securities and Exchange Commission, they, despite it sounding so big and broad, they just manage Wall Street. So that's an industry one. On the right, and this is going to be harder, I'm going to have you guys, there's 4 examples. So can you tell me if it's an executive agency, an independent executive agency, an independent regulatory agency, or a government corporation? And as a hint, there's no government corporations over there. And if you don't know anything about the agency, I can kind of give you hints. Leslie, do you want to start with the Department of Labor?
Is it independent executive agency because they can hire them, not fire?
So you're so close. It's an executive agency, and this is how you know. It has a telltale sign. If it says the Department of blank, 99.9999% time, it is a executive agency.
Okay.
And just to reiterate, if it's an executive agency, it means the person that's in charge of it is a cabinet position, like the Secretary of Labor, the Secretary of the Interior. Okay.
Okay.
So I'll double back down with you. Department of the Interior, what is it?
Executive.
Great job. Okay, NASA, Marilyn.
Can you show me the 4 again? There you go. I think it's independent executive agency.
Yes, it is, because it doesn't have a department, and you guys probably don't know this, but NASA isn't like led by a cabinet member. It is its own kind of thing. It's still, the head of NASA can be fired and hired by the president, still approved by the Senate. And just to give the spoilers, so is the EPA as well. It's an independent executive agency. Okay, cool. So we have some true or false questions, just kind of review formal rulemaking versus informal rulemaking. Formal rulemaking is going to be used for substantive rules, and it's required by the Administrative Procedural Act. So it just regulates how agencies work. And why? Because substantive rules change how we interact with the law. It changes like the meaning of things. It changes, I think the best example of a substantive law, if the United States government said, actually, all pens have to be colored red, that is a substantive law. It's changing how we interact with it. And then a procedural law or a procedural rule, it tells us how we can use the law. So informal rulemaking, informal rulemaking has to be procedural. Now, for formal rulemaking, you could use formal rulemaking for procedural, but you minimally have to do formal rulemaking for substantive rules. So this exercise is to see if you can figure out if something's substantive or procedural. And if it's substantive, as you know, we have to use formal rulemaking. And if it's procedural, you have to do informal. So Marilyn, true or false? If Fish and Wildlife Services establishes a new rule that says the prairie chicken is now an endangered species, this is an informal rule, true or false?
I would say true.
So it's going to be false, because if they're saying that the prairie chicken is now an endangered species, that's changing like what the law really is, not how it works, if that makes any sense. And you'll get what I mean in a second. So it'd be a formal rule, which would require, it's a substantive rule, so it's a formal rulemaking. Leslie, the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, says that in order for a private party to file sexual harassment claim, a private party must first allow the EEOC a right to sue on behalf of a plaintiff. This is an informal rule. True or false?
False. It's a formal rule.
Gotcha. So it would be. I'm so sorry. It's actually going to be true. It is an informal rulemaking. So it's entirely procedural. So what it's saying is, if you want to sue, you have to do this. It's not changing the definition of sexual harassment. It's not changing the definition of whether prairie chicken is endangered or not. It's just saying, if you want to like exercise legal rights, you have to exercise it in this way. So I'll double down on you, Leslie. OSHA adds a new rule that says a painter must wear certain gloves to prevent skin disease. This is a formal rule, true or false?
True.
True, absolutely. So you recovered perfect. It's a formal rule because it's changing like what that law means. You got to wear gloves. You got to wear certain gloves. Not, to sue you have to do X, Y, or Z.
Okay.
So how do you guys feel about the Food and Drug Administration and consumer product safety? Are you guys
good?
Okay. Has he said anything about how hard or like how heavy he's going to be on the Food and Drug Administration?
No.
I think he's probably gonna do more chapter 5 and 7. I feel
Yeah.
like
That's kind of what I was thinking. So we can hit because this is like the second half of chapter 6. We can hit some of the true or false stuff. So the first national law on drugs focused on adulterated drugs. True or false, Leslie?
True.
It is true. So that was the purpose of us passing the Pure Food and Drug Act, was we were concerned about adulterated drugs.
Okay.
Okay. Maryland, the first major food controversy occurred during the Spanish-American War, and it was about embalmed beef. True or false?
True.
True, absolutely. Um, just quickly running over the Pure Food and Drug Act. So it forbade interstate and foreign commerce and adulterated or misbranded food or drugs, and the standards were mostly established for drugs. And what that means is if drugs deviated from the standards, the differences had to be listed on the label. And it really focused on chemical additives in food. We'll do just a couple of these true or false. Misbranding is when a food or drug has the wrong name on the label. Maryland, what do you think?
False.
Yeah, absolutely. It is absolutely false. It's when it has the wrong ingredients. So like if it's deviated. And
That
this one's
that
also pretty.
for number one, it's Miss Title, right, or something like that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I'll go to you, Leslie, for number two. The Pure Food and Drug Act is also, in essence, the Pure Good. The Pure Food and Drug Act is also known as the Wiley Act. True or false?
True.
True. Yeah, absolutely. It is the Wiley Act. So that's definitely something worth knowing. I know he loves testing on names of stuff. Did you have a question, Marilyn?
No, I was just agreeing with you. He
Okay.
does.
You know, it's kind of his thing. So then, and I'm just summing this up. Essentially, the Pure Food and Drug Act, sunset laws that kind of rolled off. It didn't have much enforcement, and then we passed the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act of 1938, and that helped establish the Food and Drug Administration. The Food and Drug Administration went from being under the Bureau of Chemistry to then its own thing. And I'll just kind of run through some of these true or false. True or false, manufacturer had to prove drug was safe before it could be sold. Yes, under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act of 1938. Drugs still needed a prescription. It just essentially kind of boiled up the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. It just gave the FDA so much more power. And the whole purpose of that is, we were still concerned about what was going in our food, whether Americans knew what was going in their food, and whether we were okay with that. Something to highlight here is the Delaney Clause. It's absolutely something he wants us to focus on. So the FDA controlled food additives and recipes of lawful ingredients. If a manufacturer did not use an approved ingredient per the FDA list, they had to mark food as an imitation because it didn't meet that definition. And it also banned carcinogenic foods and additives. And so since you're here, Marilyn, true or false, FDA controls radiation from electronic goods?
True.
Yeah, absolutely. And then number three, I'll circle back to you. FDA controls the regulations over potential poisons, hazardous toys, and flammable fabrics. Do they?
I would say false.
It is false. That actually goes to the Consumer Product Safety Commission.
Yeah.
One thing also to highlight is that the USDA is going to be the one that manages meat. So even though meat is food, the FDA does not deal with that. FDA does manage medical devices. The biggest case on point, and he talked about this one in class, and definitely in the textbook, is going to be the breast implants. FDA does regulate tobacco. Flavored cigarettes they're not allowed. And even though they don't make smoke, the FDA is still actually allowed to regulate smokeless tobacco products. Consumer Product Safety Commission, definitely something you just kind of want to know and look at. If I had to highlight something, it would definitely be that any interested party may petition the Consumer Product Safety Commission to issue, amend, or revoke a product safety standard. Lawn darts. I'm almost pretty sure he's going to ask a question about lawn darts, and I would be shocked if he didn't. Most dangerous toy, very dangerous, and the Consumer Product Safety Commission actually pulled them. You just you can't sell lawn darts. And then so that's kind of an example of their power. If they find something that's too dangerous, they will just pull it from the market. So yeah, I tried to wrap up administrative agencies and the Food and Drug Administration pretty succinctly. Any questions about either? Anything you'd like me to dive in more, even if it is on the slide? I can do anything like that. What are you guys thinking?
No, very well covered.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you. So I know you guys said you guys were good on torts. I'll just run through some highlights, and then it looks like we're actually going to be able to get out of here early, which I guess should make you guys happy. So I know this has to be tiring too. The way I describe torts is it's a way to use civil law to get remedies from people who messed with you. So I put someone messed with you and you want to be made whole. And I know Marilyn's seen that opening slide, but I just, you're getting made whole. Okay, so here's a way to think about it. So these are personal, intentional torts. So remember, you had to have the intent to do an action. You don't have to have the intent to assault someone or commit a battery. You just had to intend to move, to do the action that ultimately caused it. So it's a difference there. But the way that it's kind of laid out, so these are personal intention torts: assault, battery, false imprisonment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, invasion of privacy, defamation, broken down to slander and libel, malicious prosecution, and fraud. Quick review of kind of the big ones: assault and battery elements. For an assault, there has to be an action, intentional, and this one has fear, and it results in an immediate fear of a harmful or offensive touching. And it's assault and battery are almost the exact same thing, except battery, there's no fear because you were actually hit. So Leslie, if you punch someone, did you commit a battery or did you commit assault?
Battery.
Absolutely, because battery is the hitting of someone. Now, if you batter someone, you can also assault them. But if you if you assault someone, you can also batter them. But it's possible to batter someone and not assault them. And I think I'll give an example of that in a second. There are there's three defenses to assault and battery, and they're both the same. It's consent. If someone says you can do it and then you do it, civilly you are fine. Now, maybe criminally you're not. Privilege. So examples, a police officer, a police officer has the right to arrest you, detain you, do all that stuff, and they can touch you even when you're not necessarily cool with it. Self-defense. If someone's coming to kill you, you can commit a battery or assault against them and still be fine. Okay. We won't do all of this one, but I'll kind of read out an example, and I know Marilyn's seen this one. So Jim is at his desk when Dwight pulls out a can of bear spray. Dwight tells Jim, "I'm sick and tired of your pranks. I'm going to mess you up." Did Dwight commit assault against Jim? Absolutely. Assuming that Jim was, fearful, because Dwight pulled out the bear spray. He did it intentionally. And Jim, if he had an immediate fear of a harmful or offensive touching, absolutely assault. It's harmful or offensive touching would absolutely be satisfied by a can of bear spray. Now, if he was never sprayed, no battery. Okay. If Dwight was even kidding and there's only silly string in the can and there was never bear spray, still assault. It doesn't matter. If Dwight told Jim he was going to do it ahead of time, it's probably not assault because Jim wouldn't be necessarily scared if he knew it was silly string. And the one I really want to highlight here was, what if Jim was wearing noise-canceling headphones and was asleep so he could not hear? So if Jim had no way of knowing that he was about to get sprayed with bear spray, and he was asleep or wearing noise-canceling headphones and couldn't see anything, there's no way he could be fearful. So it would just be battery if he was sprayed, not assault. So that's something I wanted to highlight there. So with this one, Michael needed a new pair of shoes, so he went to Target. Michael found 2 pairs of shoes he liked, and when he went to try one on, he wasn't looking and accidentally knocked over Meredith. Did Michael commit battery? What do you think, Leslie? Did Michael commit battery?
He wasn't looking and accidentally knocked over. Yes, because he still did it. He still knocked her out and it was still done.
Absolutely. Like that. It wasn't just, as you said, like you don't have to intend to knock her over. It's just that you intended to move. Mm-hmm. What if she wasn't injured?
It would have been wouldn't it be accident? He still hit her though, so it would still be battery.
You don't have to have harm with any of these intentional torts. Harm is not required. Okay. So that's something you want to definitely remember going to the exam. If even if he just tapped her on the wrist and she didn't want to be touched and it was harmful or offensive touching, she wins. Now maybe she only wins $1, but she still wins. So good job. Harm is not required. We'll just do a quick defamation one because I think it's an easy thing to test. James saw Johnny Manziel walking to the MSC. James's ex-girlfriend cheated on James with Manziel, and so he wanted revenge. James decided he was going to say knowingly false statements about Manziel. James yelled, "Manziel has HIV, is a sex offender, and commits tax fraud." Manziel was subsequently removed from A&M payroll as an assistant coach. Did James commit defamation? If yes, slander or libel? What do you guys think? What do you guys think? We'll let someone tackle. What was defamation committed? What do you think, Leslie?
Yes, because he knew that there were false statements, but he still said it.
Yeah.
And it would be slander. What's the difference between slander and libel again?
Okay, so one is going to be written. So like it's in a, so libel is written or it's in like in a permanent form, such as a videotape. And slander, it's like oral or unrecorded. So anything I'm saying now, it's being recorded. So if I, just committed defamation, I would be committing libel because it's being recorded. It's in a fixed medium. But if this wasn't recorded, it would actually be slander. So, and I think you said slander. So yeah, good job.
Yeah.
Marilyn, what if Manziel wasn't removed from A&M's payroll and nothing happened to him?
Then it wasn't defamation.
Yeah, it wasn't defamation because and it won't let me highlight. It has to be a false statement, and if it's with a public figure, it has to be with malice. That's what that star is. That'd be like knowingly false. Has to be said to a third party, and there has to be harm. So what a third party requirement is, if James and Manziel were in the bathroom together and no one else heard, no defamation. So there has to be at least one other person hearing. Or if James was like alone with his dad and he told him this, Manziel doesn't have to be there, but the false statement has to be conveyed to a third party. And there's two defenses to defamation. It's truth. Truth is an absolute privilege. I mean, an absolute defense. If you are telling the truth, you cannot have committed defamation against someone. So if Manziel really commits tax fraud, really is a sex offender, and he really is HIV, then James did not commit defamation. And privilege means like you are allowed to say that. And those are very narrow exceptions, or at least privileges, truth isn't. So then there's business intentional torts. There's disparagement, which is when you talk bad about a business or a product. Intentional interference with the contractual relationship or relations. Summed up, this one here is like the Pennzoil v. Texaco case, where Pennzoil, I believe, had like a contract with another oil company, and then Texaco convinced Pennzoil, I believe, to get out of it and actually do the deal with Texaco. And you can't do that. Like, you as a third party cannot try to get another company in a contract to try to get out of it. Like, you can't do that to them. Okay. Interference with a prospective economic advantage. This is not a thing in Texas. Okay. Texas does not acknowledge interference with a prospective economic advantage. They just don't. Property intentional torts. There's 3, and I'm not really gonna talk about nuisance. It's not that big of a deal, but trespass to land, talk about real property. If real property is like, if it's on the ground, if it's attached to the land, it's like a house, not what's in the house, but a house is real property. An acre, that's real property. Trespass personal property, that's everything else in a house. That's your phone, that's your car, that's your motorcycle, that's your stuffed bear, that's my Mac. Conversion it's like trespass to personal property, but somehow even more. Okay. Trespass to land, keeping it super simple. Intentionally cause an intrusion either by entry or refusal to leave the plaintiff's real property. So Leslie, if Michael wants to surprise Jim and Pam with a visit to their house at night or at midnight, Michael enters in through the window and has never been extended an invitation to visit, did he trespass? What do you think?
No, because he knows the person. Hold on. No, because he had her consent because they were planning on spending the night. Wait, Pam had a visit to her house by midnight. He had her consent, so it wouldn't be trespassing.
I don't think he had a consent because he wants to surprise them. He never had their consent. He just wants to show up and just to sleep over.
So it would be trespassing because he didn't have their
It
consent?
would be trespass.
Okay.
And when it says either by entry or refusal to leave, and so entry, typically you have to tell the person that they're trespassing, but there's two ways.
Okay.
You could explicitly do that by just say, hey, leave my property, you're trespassing, putting no trespass signs, or painting property like in a certain color. I think it's pink. Or implicitly, if you entered in through a locked door, you kicked it down, yeah, you trespassed. You don't have to be told that, going through a
Okay.
locked door is trespass. If
Okay.
you're going through a window, people normally don't enter through windows because, it's not like a normal way to do things. So
Mm-hmm.
he trespassed. It's one of those things like when you
Okay.
read it with your gut, you're like, that's a trespass.
Okay.
So Michael absolutely trespassed.
Okay.
Slight twist on it, and this is for you, Marilyn. What if Michael decided at the last second that visiting at midnight was a bad idea and he turned to leave? Right as he was climbing into his car, he heard Pam yell, "Help, I'm in danger." If Michael goes to help, did he trespass?
I would say no because she yelled for help, and isn't that like one of the defenses? Like if they call out for help, then they can go and trespass.
Absolutely. I was going to ask that one next. So, Marilyn, back to you. The two defenses to trespass to land are: one, the trespasser entered the property to help a person in danger, and the trespasser entered the property to protect the property. Is that true or false? Are those the two defenses?
I would say false because two, I don't think that a trespasser has the authority to protect the property.
So it actually is true.
Oh, okay.
It is. So, Leslie, true or false, harm to land is required for trespass to have occurred?
False because it wouldn't even be your land, so you can't go in there.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing with battery. Like since it's an intentional tort, if you do it, harm is not required. So
Okay.
good job.
One question for that slide
Yeah.
that we just did. What would be an example, since I thought number 3 was false too. What would be an example of the property to protect the property?
Yeah. So if there's a fire, okay, like in California, if there's a wildfire ripping down your street and you know that your neighbor has a sprinkler system, so you break into his garage to turn onto the sprinkler system to keep his house from like catching fire, then
Okay.
you're not going to get charged with trespass.
Okay.
But like it's also one of those things, like if you break down their door to like, I don't know, to prevent like a minor damage, like come on, bro. It needs to be, it's got to go with
Major.
your gut. Like
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
Negligence, there's technically five elements. Duty, breach of duty, causation, but for proximate causation, and then injuries and damages. So like I just said, unlike intentional torts, negligence, you got to be damaged. It can be a bumper, a bruise to property, a broken bone. And then duty and breach of duty deals with the reasonable person standard. And that is, there's no reasonable person. Jesus isn't reasonable because he didn't, like, if you're a Christian or just even if you're a biblical scholar, Jesus is considered perfect. So reasonable person isn't a perfect person. It's a reasonable person, which none of it, like it doesn't exist. And so it has to be this concept of what is this mythical person who's always reasonable? What do they do in that situation? And if you deviate from this hypothetical mythical reasonable person, if you deviate at all from them, then you no longer acted like a reasonable person, and then you are in breach. Okay. There's 4 defenses to negligence. First one's assumption of the risk. So if you assumed all the risks and you were aware of all the risks and the risks you encountered were foreseeable, then it is going to be your fault. So if you decide to go like skydiving and you sign a assumption of the risk waiver saying, yeah, there's a chance that they mess it up and that the parachute doesn't go off properly and I break all my bones and die. If you sign that and then you break all your bones and you don't die, you almost die, you assumed all risk, they're not liable. Okay. Second one, it's called contributory negligence. And this is a minority view. Okay. Not many states do that because it's incredibly harsh. So if both parties are negligent, let's say you were driving your car, drinking a cup of coffee, and a person ran a red light. So because you were drinking your cup of coffee, you weren't paying attention to the road, so you weren't being a reasonable person, and then you hit the car who ran the red light. Yes, they are more negligent than you because they ran a red light, but because you weren't only driving, you also were negligent. And because you both were negligent, even though he may have been more negligent than you, even though you were still negligent in getting involved in the accident, you get zero recovery. So even if you're 1% negligent under contributory negligence, no recovery. Now, some states say if under contributory negligence, and it's still just contributory negligence, if you are more liable than the other party, then you don't get a recovery. And that's not as harsh, but that's the minority of the minority states. Comparative negligence is what a lot of states are going to now. So back in that coffee and driving example, if the victim was 40% negligent, so if you were deemed 40% negligent for drinking coffee when the guy ran the red light and he hit you, and they were 60% negligent, then you would get 60% of your damages. Texas is one of those states. Superseding cause example, this one's kind of complicated, but essentially if you started down a path to cause an accident, but then something came and superseded it, and it still, and this person was still injured because of then someone else's fault, you're not liable. So if you owned a giant bowling ball, okay, and it was on top of a hill, and you accidentally pushed the giant, like a 20-foot bowling ball down, and it's rolling towards, people coming out of a target. Had nothing else happened, this bowling ball still would have trampled like 30 people, okay? But then let's just say a meteor dropped out of the sky and killed these people. Well, even though had your bowling ball was going to kill these people or at least smush them, and even though it was going to do that because the meteor came down and like jumped it superseded that bowling ball, you are not liable. And I know that sounds an incredibly crazy example, and it of course has never happened, but that's just the easiest way to demonstrate it. So even though your bowling ball and your negligence was going to kill these people and hurt these people, and you'd be liable because a third event came and stopped it and caused it anyway, you are not liable. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. And then we kind of just did an example of this. Do you guys want to try to do a negligent example, or should I just move on?
I mean, it's whatever.
It doesn't matter.
Okay, cool. Intellectual property, I kept this one pretty short. It's just one of those things you just kind of read it and know. Copyright is protection for authorship of expression in a tangible form. So I have a question for you. We'll start with Marilyn. Do you have to apply for copyright to have? Do you have to apply for a copyright to have protection? True or false?
Oh.
No. That's a yes or no. My bad. You said no. You're absolutely right. As soon as you make it, it is giving copyright protections. Okay. Why would you want to register it, Marilyn?
Because even though if you don't register it, like if you can have problems later on, you won't be able to get money for those problems. So if you register
absolutely, you can recover more money later on if you register it. Leslie, do you know anything about the Sonny Bono Act?
No, I don't know what that is.
Okay, no problem. So the Sonny Bono Act was recently, I think Congress in like 1990 or early 2000, they extended all the copyrights for like major like Disney. It essentially kept Mickey Mouse out of the public domain. So normally the length of copyright is the author plus 70. Well, Mickey Mouse's copyright was about to expire, but then Disney was like, we should pay off some legislators through lobbyists and extend our copyright. So that is what the Sonny Bono Act. It's still in effect, and I think in like 2025 is when Mickey Mouse now expires. So I'm curious to see if it's going to be extended again. So that was a copyright. It's protection for an authorship of expression in a tangible form. So that'd be like a book, a CD, a movie. If I gave a speech but I didn't write it down, the speech would not be copyrighted. Now, if I recorded the speech, that would be copyrighted. Number 2 is a patent, and a patent is a grant from the federal government. There is no state law involving patents, okay? So since it's a grant from the federal government, it is not automatic. You have to register to get a patent, and you have to be either the inventor or the agent, so a lawyer of the inventor. And a patent has to be new and or novel, and it has to be useful. So you can't get a patent for just everything. If you design a rubber band that gets 20% bigger, probably not patentable. Maybe. I'm not a patent lawyer, but like it's not super novel because we already have rubber bands. Now, improvements can be patented, but like it has to also be incredibly useful. Categories continued. Number 3 is going to be trademarks. Trademarks are protected under state and federal law. Under the federal law, it's the Lanham Act. And the point of trademarks are to prevent customer confusion. And it's like a word, symbol, name design that allows the consumer to identify a company as the source. So I know there's a little bit more there, but I tried to keep copy or intellectual property really simple. Any questions about intellectual property? Okay, and I think the last thing we have is strict liability and products liability. How are you guys feeling on strict liability?
I think I know it. Yeah.
Okay, I'll keep it really simple because I know you guys are probably getting tired. So there's express warranties and implied warranties, and essentially an express warranty is when you go to buy something, you were told that it does this thing, so it has a safety feature that does this. The reason why you bought it is because it has the safety feature that does X. And then if you use it and it fails to have that safety feature, then they have violated an express warranty. An implied warranty is, instead of them stating it, it's going to be like a description, maybe on the box, or like, you know, some things you should have the expectation of safety, and if it fails to have that expectation of safety when you use it as it should be used, they have violated an implied warranty, excuse me. So for example, if Sierra is in the market for a new kitchen knife, if she goes to Target and purchases a nice knife, when she gets home and uses it for the first time, the knife separates from its handles and cuts her badly, is Dyson Slice the manufacturer liable under products liability? 100%. Absolutely. Like you should have the ability to use your knife as intended. So that would violate the implied warranty. So strict liability, there are a couple different elements. Has to be for a sale of goods. The product was defective when it left the manufacturer. The defect was a substantial factor. Danger was unreasonable. So biggest example of strict liability is Prius. So you guys, when we were all kids, like, you know, Prius had a thing where the gas pedal got stuck to the ground, okay? And then people had crashed their cars. Strict liability, because it was defective when it was sold. But this one is a pretty easy example. So under strict liability, so Toyota makes a new Prius, which is supposed to be even better for the environment. If Tiffany buys the Prius, but when she goes to drive it for the first time, the gas pedal sticks and she wrecks the car, is Toyota liable under strict liability? 100%. And I know that because there was a sale of goods, a Prius was bought. The Prius was defective when it left the manufacturer's control. She bought it new. Was the defect a substantial factor in the injury? Absolutely. The defect is what caused the injury. If the pedal had not stuck, she wouldn't have wrecked it. And I think wrecking a car and a gas pedal sticking is unreasonable. So strict liability, pretty simple. And like I said, I'll email you guys with PowerPoints if you guys want to try out some more of the examples. Last one, I'll talk about market share liability. So products have to be the exact identical copies. There's no distinguishing factors. Pardon me. No way to be sure who sold what. So probably my favorite example. There's a group of companies and they sent their head scientists to a conference. At the conference, the scientists invented a new sugar replacement called Yummy Tasty Healthy. Each company then started making the new sugar replacement for themselves using the same recipe. So there's no way of knowing who made what. 8 months later, millions of people turned into zombies because the magic ingredient caused people to have their brains rot. Since it's impossible to know which company's product a person ate, how can each company be held liable? Okay, so there's no way of knowing which company made what, and they're all using the same recipe. So essentially what's going to happen is if company A had 10% market share, they're going to be 10% liable. And if company B has 20%, they're going to be 20% liable. And if company C is 30% of the market, they're going to be 30% liable. And if company 4 is 40%, well, that's the last 40% of the 100%. So they're going to be 40% liable. And there's just no way of knowing. There's no way to know which company's product you used. So that's market share liability. And that only applies if the products are exact, identical copies. So that's all the slides I have for you guys. Any questions about any of the topics? And it could be anything from chapter 7, 6, or 5. Anything not included on the slideshow. What do you guys have anything?
You covered it very, very well.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Then I'll go ahead and email you guys this. And like I said, if you
Okay.
guys have any questions between now and the exam, feel free just to reach out and I can take a look over anything you have.
Okay. Thank
Well,
you so
good.
much.
You guys are going to do great. I think you guys definitely, I think you guys all made progress. So.
Yes, for sure. Okay. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, you're very welcome.